Well, good evening, WNBA and LA Sparks fans. Happy Sunday evening and welcome into the LA Sparks 365 Network, your 24/7 365 comprehensive home of the WNBA and your two-time WNBA champion Los Angeles Sparks. Welcome, folks, to a late-night edition here of Sparks 365. We will recap last night's Sparks victory, folks, and just to let you know, this will be the only show on the block tonight here this evening because we are running a bit behind schedule because I have been swallowed at work today, folks. I had to announce 2 9-inning baseball games today, and the voice is a bit tired today, as is the body. So we will take it easy and go with one show tonight, folks. We'll talk about last night's win for the Sparks over the home team Tulsa Shock yesterday that saw the Sparks go ahead by a lot. They squandered towards the end, and they came back to hold on to win. We'll recap some of the games in the WNBA tonight, and we also, of course, get to the Sparks' next home game and break down that against the Chicago Sky, and we'll also talk more about the upcoming schedule for the Sparks, and, of course, we'll talk more about the return of Kristi Toliver, folks, but we are waiting to be joined here by Chris Woodmansey in a few minutes here, folks. He will be hopping in soon. He was just finishing up some stuff at his house, so he'll be joining us here in Ryan Lewis and Macklemore Thrift Shop style here sometime very soon. But, folks, we're going to look ahead to the game from last night that saw the LA Sparks last night go ahead by a lot at halftime, implode towards the end, but they were able to rally and win the game in overtime last night. 92-86 last night, the final score from the BOK Center in downtown Tulsa, Oklahoma. We'll get to the press release first from the contest. Kristi Toliver came through with big shots in her first game back with the LA Sparks. Toliver made 2 clutch free throws and then hit a three-pointer to give LA the lead for good later in overtime, and LA held on to beat Tulsa 92-89 on Saturday. Toliver, who missed 6 games while helping Slovakia qualify for the European National Championship, she said, "That's my job. That's what I get paid to do. We needed a big basket, and that's what I do," close quote. Nneka Ogwumike led the Sparks with 22 points on a 10-for-14 shooting from the field to lead the Sparks now at 6-8, who recovered from their second straight win after giving up a 15-point lead in the second half. Jantel Lavender had 16 points and 11 rebounds, and Candace Parker scored 15, and Toliver finished with 12. Toliver's three put the Sparks up 87-85 with a minute 21 to play in the extra period, and the Sparks made 5 free throws in the final 27 seconds to win the game. Candace Parker, who also scored 5 points in overtime, said, "It's a good win. This is our first back-to-back wins this season. It's obviously great to have Kristi back. She hit some big shots," close quote. Parker credited the team's defense in the extra period for the ability to overcome the struggles this season. She also added that we were able to get some stops down the stretch, close quote. Skylar Diggins had 29 points for the Shock, who are now 6-8, who had won 2 straight. Rookie Odyssey Sims had 17 points and a season-high 10 assists, while Courtney Paris had 12 points and 15 rebounds for 8 double-doubles this season. And sounds like someone's going to join in, folks. We've got an empty studio, but we'll see what goes on here, I guess.
I'm here.
Well, you may be here, man, but we can't see you. There you are, man. There he is, folks. Chris Woodmansey live and in full here, wearing his Lakers attire for some damn reason. We'll figure out why later on. Of course, folks, the Lakers Network launching October 5th, 2014, 9 p.m. on the Lakers 365 Network. So Chris is here to pump up both products. But Chris, get your WNBA thinking cap on, man. We're talking about the Sparks here, man. But other than that, how's it going tonight up there at the Big A? And it's Anaheim, California, not what we were just talking about before we came on the air here. What's up, buddy?
Nothing much. I'm just hanging here, just thinking about tomorrow. To be breaking down in tears.
Oh, man, try to block that out for the next 20 minutes or so, man. We got some Sparks basketball to talk about, Chris. We were halfway during the article here when you joined us here, but we'll get back on track here, folks, with LA opening the game with a 11-4 run. They led 47-32 at halftime. Ogwumike left the game briefly in the first quarter after once again getting hit on the nose and returning wearing a face mask. We'll get to that later on. Tulsa, who is now 6-9, I should say, after they lost tonight to the Phoenix Mercury. They struggled early as the Sparks did a good job of limiting scoring touches for Diggins and Sims, who were combined 4 for 9 from the field in the first half. Head coach of the Shock, Fred Williams, said that we battled. We just weren't getting the shots to fall early. We were chasing them most of the first half. Close quote. The Sparks' first. That's actually a typo here on the article here. It should say the Shock's first-year coach said the team laced up the sneakers in the second half and started to run. Fred also added that we had them on their heels when Tulsa scored 22 third-quarter points, which is also a false stat. We got back into it and into a flow, close quote. Tulsa took the lead, 69-68 with 8.5 to play in the fourth quarter on the first of back-to-back threes by Jordan Hooper, who finished with 9 points. And despite building a 4-point lead down the stretch, the Shock couldn't get a good shot at the buzzer after Lavender's basket tied the game with 17 seconds to play in the fourth quarter at 80. Williams said it came down to 1 or 2 shots that didn't fall, close quote. In OT, the Sparks pulled away, hitting 7 of 10 free throws in the fourth quarter. Well, Chris, you kind of had a feeling, bro, that this game would be a slugfest, but LA squandered that game, and they are so damn lucky to pick up that W on yesterday afternoon, Chris. And I know, Chris, it was a false stat because I said 22, Chris. They let up 32 points in the third quarter in that game yesterday. So obviously, man, it seems like, Chris, the A team showed up and the bench warmer showed up in the second half, Chris, until the A team got it back on track in the fourth and overtime session, Chris. I'll tell you what, that is a unacceptable game, Chris. It's a win, yes, but you squandered a 15-point lead and nearly lost in regulation, Chris. But hey, a win's a win. Ugly game. They got the win, Chris, and now they're back in fourth place. But man, no, I'm kind of going like this, man, because that could have been devastating for another loss, Chris. But, okay, they got the win, that's all that matters, man. But above all, the game should not have been that close, man. What are your final thoughts about the game from last night?
It was an unacceptable win, but a win is a win. We should have been not this close, should have not won in overtime, but a win is a win. And if we make the playoffs by like 1 game or something, we'll look back at this game, and if we do win the WNBA champion, it'll be all because of this game.
All right, Chris, don't jump to September conclusions here in June, man, going into July. Just don't get ahead of yourself, buddy, because you don't know what's going to happen with Minnesota and everyone else in the Western Conference. Chris, the score by quarter, the line score, Chris, is what really did LA in, and it's even making me shake my head, Chris. Chris, listen to the numbers from the game yesterday. Sparks by quarter: 23, 24, 18, 15, 12 in the overtime session. Game total of 92. Chris, for Tulsa: 13, 19, 32, 16, and 9. Chris, that game could have been decided if LA lost. The difference maker, the turning point, the X factor, Chris, would have been quarter 3, because LA gave up 32 freaking points in the third quarter, Chris, and they got completely annihilated in that third quarter, Chris. But right now, okay, I look at it this way, Chris, is the turning point as well is the third quarter, complete travesty that was, Chris. But also, Jantel Lavender saves the game for LA. The crucial jumper to tie the game at 90, or at 80 to send the game into overtime, with 17 seconds to play in the game, Chris. But still, I mean, Chris, I know that a win is a win, regardless if it's a good win, a bad win, or a game like this, Chris. But still, though, man, that was unacceptable by the Sparks yesterday to put us in cardiac arrest last night.
Yep, agreed. Unacceptable. Putting the Sparks fans another cardiac arrest, which we just been through that this past offseason.
All right, man. No more about the offseason. We know about what happened, man, but just enough. Tapping out with the offseason and tapping out with NFL football about coming back to Los Angeles, Chris. You know that already right now, right at this point in time. Okay, Chris, we've got game stats as well, man. For the Sparks, field goal shooting, 47% for LA, 41% for Tulsa. Three-point shooting, 40% for the three-point shooting, Chris, 40% for LA, 31% for the Shock. Free throw shooting, Chris, still a massive problem for LA, 72% free throw shooting, 88% for the Shock. Total rebounds, 9-7 LA. Offensive rebounds, 11-8 in favor of Tulsa. 16 Tulsa turnovers, 11 LA turnovers, 18 fast break points for the Sparks. And Tulsa had 16. And Chris, here's the bigger point here, man, is the biggest lead stat, man. LA's biggest lead was 15. They squandered it, Chris. Tulsa's biggest lead was 4, and they coughed it up in a minute. They had a 4-point lead and it was gone after a minute. And, of course, Chris, points in the paint, which, Chris, remains a theme the Sparks have to own every game. They did it again, 54, 44 points in the paint. Player stats, Chris, for the first time all year, I think, Chris, it's not Candace Parker for once, Chris. Nneka Ogwumike, 22 points. Jantel Lavender, 11 rebounds. The MVP, Candace Parker, 7 assists, 2 blocks. And 2 different Sparks players at 2 steals for the Shock. Skylar Diggins on a roll right now, 29 points. Courtney Paris, 15 rebounds. Odyssey Sims, 10 assists. Gloria Johnson, 3 steals, and Paris, 3 blocks. Chris, okay, I think Nneka Ogwumike, Chris, needs to sit out next game versus Tulsa because it seems we've noticed the trend, Chris, when they play Tulsa, she is getting hit in the face, either busted open or her nose is getting hurt now. So, Chris, I think new theory, don't play Nneka versus Tulsa because she will get hurt. What do you think?
Yeah, I think so too.
Chris, real quick, is there like some bad blood between the Shock and Nneka Ogwumike for some reason, Chris? Because we know last year that Elena Beard, not Candace Parker, busted her open last year. This season, Gloria Johnson elbowed her back on June 19th. That caused her to miss that next game, or the rest of the game. And then now Chris, she gets hit again. Now she's got her. Remember the photo, Chris, that Shorty showed us a while back of Candace Parker and Nneka Ogwumike as Batman and Robin? She had the mask on and stuff, man. So, Chris, either put the mask on or just don't play Nneka versus Tulsa, please.
Yep, agreed. And I won't be surprised if the other Ogwumike gets busted open or hit by Tulsa.
I sincerely hope that Sinead does not get hurt next. But Chris, going back over the numbers here, man. Chris, we talked about this on the program a few days ago, Chris, about about the Sparks tandem right now, okay? Because we know about what other teams are doing, like the Mercury and stuff, and the Lynx, Chris. Either a duo or a big three, Chris. But again, man, we said it. I think it's true, man, that the Sparks are slowly, very slowly, man, building that dynamic duo or big three, Chris, of Parker, Ogwumike, and Lavender, Chris. Because you look at the stats, man, Ogwumike 22 points, Lavender 11 rebounds, and Parker had 7 assists, man. So I don't know what to make of it, man. But I think it's going to be a possible future marketing point will be Parker, Ogwumike, Lavender is the big three to watch in LA.
Yep, I think probably, I'm calling it, probably it's going to be a 4. Once Candace Wiggins gets back, I think it's going to be a 4 duo.
Chris, I think it'll be the tandem of Parker, Ogwumike, and Lavender, Chris. But the duo, Chris, is going to be Public Enemy, is going to be, one a dead or alive defense, which will be Wiggins and Arminty Harrington, Chris, because they've been brought here to bring their defensive mentality to this team, Chris. So I think you'll have the tandem, the top 3, which is Parker, Ogwumike, and Lavender, Chris. Then you'll have, the LA Outlaws, I guess, between Wiggins and Harrington, Chris, for their defensive presence. And Lindsey Harding, Chris, won't even be mentioned in any of those categories right now at this point in time because she is still off key right now. The next time, folks, the Shock and Sparks hook up will be August 5th. 20 days removed, Chris. It is Chris, and August 5th, by the way, Chris, is 20 days away from the game last year on August 25th, where the Sparks made that improbable comeback, and, of course, you know what happened with Nneka's eyebrow getting busted open that last game. So August 5th, Shock and Sparks, 7:30 p.m. at the wonderful and my #1 arena now, if you're going on the 18th, the Staples Center in downtown Los Angeles, California. Folks, by the way, the next Sparks home game coming up is this Tuesday night, July 1st at 7 p.m. when the Sparks take on the Eastern Conference defending. They'll take on the Chicago Sky on Tuesday, July 1st at 7 o'clock p.m. Game can be seen on ESPN2. And again, folks, there's also going to be Adidas Team Night, where any kids or any young fans, I should say, that are going to the game on Tuesday can wear their rec basketball jerseys to the game, and the kids and young fans can win some gear courtesy of Adidas. To get tickets for the Sparks game on July 1st, you guys, of course, can call 844-GO-SPARKS, 844-GO-SPARKS, or log on to lasparks.com and click on the tickets link and buy your seats through access.com. That is the Sky and Sparks, Tuesday, July 1st, 7 p.m., Adidas team night at Staples Center. Sparks basketball. Expect memories. All right, folks, so Chris Mancy has left the hangout, so we'll see if he hops back in here sometime soon. If not, we will figure out what happens. Probably his iPod overheated, perhaps, folks, so we will be a one-man show for the remainder of the night. It looks like perhaps we'll have more about that later, folks. But again, the Sparks last night in overtime defeat the Tulsa Shock, 92-89, the final score last night at the BOK Center in Oklahoma, in Tulsa, Oklahoma, folks. And the upcoming Sparks, Sparks, look ahead, folks, their upcoming 4 games. Again, Tuesday at home versus Chicago, 7 p.m. game time on ESPN2. July 3rd on Thursday, the Sparks will be back up in Seattle playing the Storm at 7 p.m. on Time Warner Cable Sportsnet. Sunday, July 6th, the Sparks will host Phoenix at 1 o'clock p.m. on ESPN2. And the Sparks will embark on a 4-game Eastern road trip. Those 4 games, folks, will be July 8th at Minnesota, 6 p.m. on ESPN2. July 11th in New York at 4:30 on Time Warner Cable Sportsnet. July 13th at 10 a.m. versus Connecticut at 10 a.m. on Sportsnet. And then July 15th versus Indiana at 5 p.m. All right, I think I hear some noise in the background, so I think that must mean that Chris is back in the hangout. Yes, he is. Chris, did your iPod overheat, man? What happened over there?
I think my phone got overheated.
Okay, so that's what I thought, because it's pretty warm still, man. We know it's summertime, and it seems like, man, that the devices just can't handle the summer heat either, because they seem to poop out a lot often here. But, Chris, we're going to look ahead, man, to Tuesday's game. The Sparks take on the Chicago Sky at Staples Center, Chris. And I will tell you what, man, that the Sky have not been the same cohesive unit, man, that we knew last season. And it is predominantly, Chris, known right now that the Sky are without, probably, Chris, everyone's favorite player in the entire league, Elena Del Don, Chris, of her story, of her comeback, knockdown comeback story, that she's still, Chris, battling her Lyme disease. She has been out for a few games, Chris. We don't know yet if Elena's not going to play on Tuesday. But, Chris, I mean, we talk a lot about, about how the Sparks relied heavily on Candace Parker, Chris, but I think, man, that with Chicago, this is not the same team that I thought would have blown out L.A. this past month, earlier this month, Chris, where the Sparks did the complete polar opposite, man. But right now, man, the Sky are walking wounded, Chris. Without EDD, man, they have plummeted to the bottom part of the Eastern Conference standings, man. And, Chris, I mean, we know that basketball is a team game, Chris, but did you solely believe, man, that without one particular player, that a team, in any fashion of basketball, the NBA, the D-League, the WNBA, or college, did you really, Chris, do you really think, though, that without one big player on the team, that a team, Chris, can go from being the top dog all the way to basically, Chris, the bottom of their conference at all, man? I mean, do you think do you at all think, man, that is at all possible for that to happen that quick in a span of games like it has with the Chicago Sky?
No, I did not thought that was going to happen. One big player was going to plummet to the top dog all the way down to the bottom pits.
I mean, Chris, the Sky have not been the same team that has been the same club that we know very well, Chris. I'm going to go. We'll give you guys a quick standings update right now from the WNBA. And Chris, considering how bad Chicago has been, Chris, they are in third right now in the Eastern Conference. They are 7-8, Chris. They have played 15 games, and they're 4 out of first place. And, Chris, to see about Chicago right now, Chris, we have to play Connecticut right now as a 3 seed playing a 2 seed, Chris. No one would have thought, Chris, that right now that Chicago or Minnie would be in this position, man, where they're not in first place and ahead by a bunch of games right now in each conference.
Yep, agreed.
But, Chris, it's still Chicago. It's still a tough team, man. It's a team that's going to be good for a while, man. But, Chris, in your mind, knowing right now that Chicago is walking hurt right now, can the Sparks possibly dig down deep inside, Chris, and can they smack Chicago again like they did in Chicago but on the Staples Center floor, Chris? Could it possibly be another ugly game like it was in Chicago this past June, or what do you think, man?
I think if the Sparks that was up in Chicago is the same team and down here in Los Angeles, and if Chicago's still walking her like they are, I think the Sparks could do it again.
Chris, I'm not going to fully say that LA smacks them down like they did in Chicago, Chris. It would have to take a great deal and a great start, Chris, for that to happen, man. But I'll tell you what, man. I mean, the bonus here, man, is if Elena is out. If she's out, you might have a chance, Chris, but she's in. And just like DT, man, if she gets going early, making shots, you might be in trouble, Chris. I think it'll be a game like last season at Staples Center, Chris, with the Sparks. It was basically, Chris, grinded out a win, Chris. They were up by a bit. They kind of squandered towards the end, Chris. They won by 4 last season at Staples Center, man. But I think if LA plays their same game they played in Chicago, they might have a chance, man, to possibly lay the smackdown on Chicago. But Chris, it wouldn't surprise me if Chicago won the game, because LA probably. Chris, I think the Sparks really have. I mean, we know they haven't had that feeling of winning back-to-back games for the first time, man. So that might be heavy on their minds, Chris. But at the same time, man, I'm not counting them out. I'm not saying they're not gonna win. But they'd have to play Chris. They would have to play Chris basically a perfect game. Hit every shot early. The defensive stops, and above all, Chris, not squandering the big lead. I mean, the big lead is what you have to hang on to. And Chris, don't squander the lead, Chris. Let Tulsa squander the lead. Let the other team you're playing, Chris, squander the lead. Not yourself, Chris, but I think if you start hot, you stay hot, you play some defense, man, you got a shot. But again, man, remember, this is still the Chicago Sky they're playing here, man, that pretty much rolled through to the first round of the postseason last year in the Eastern Conference.
Yep.
Folks, we had a couple of WNBA milestones to report yesterday and today. Folks, real quick, the WNBA one, Chris. No surprise, man, that this would happen, but about time. But it was bound to happen. But Chris, Brittany Griner of the Phoenix Mercury has now set the new WNBA record, Chris, for most blocks in a single game, Chris. BG had 11, count them, 11 blocks in the Phoenix's. And by the way, folks, the Mercury's 5th consecutive win to still hang on to first place in the Western Conference as they beat the Shock tonight, 80-77, Chris. And by the way, Chris, that is right now the 11 blocks is now a single game WNBA record. And Chris, again, I'm not surprised that it was BG, Chris. I mean, if anyone was going to set that record, it would have been Brittany because of her size and her strength, Chris. But I mean, man, hey, any milestone you get, Chris, whether it's blocks, points, rebounds, Chris, anything is always worth noting, Chris. And congrats to BG. Of course, man, it was going to happen sooner or later, man. But anytime, man, you get a milestone, it's always fun to talk about these, man. So, again, congratulations to Brittany Griner of the Phoenix Mercury on the new record, most points in a single game, 11 blocks for the Baylor Bay Area yesterday. And, of course, Chris, the Sparks milestone, Chris, Kristi Tolliver, who we're going to talk about next, Chris, her 2,000th career WNBA point last night for KT, coming back to L.A., Chris, and we know the struggle, how bad it was, Chris, when she was gone, that this was not the same L.A. Sparks team. Chris, she comes back and basically sparks up the three-point shooting last night, man, and gets the big three-pointer. 12 points in her first game back, Chris, and above all, man, her 2,000th career point, Chris. I'll ask you, man, but how much do you think the Sparks missing KT in the lineup, man, now she's back in the lineup after last night?
I think the Sparks missed so much of Kristi Tolliver, and now she's back, and I think even they squandered a big lead, KT's back and was clutch and helped the Sparks win.
Chris, I've come to the conclusion that whoever's in charge of marketing the Sparks, when they have all the words that say expect something, I think that they solely, Chris, used the expression expect clutch for one particular buzzer beater reason. And that would be the 2012 game against the Shock where KT hit the game-winning buzzer to win the game. We doing the buzzer beater high step, folks. So, Chris, I think that's where they got the expect clutch slogan from, I think, is that buzzer beater 2 years ago against the Tulsa Shock.
Yeah, I think it was.
So, Chris, I know, man, that earlier this month, man, that we were outlashing at the Sparks front office for how this was a mishandled situation, Chris. And, Chris, in my view, it still is a mishandled situation, Chris, that it took her this damn long to get back to L.A., Chris. So, I mean, you know, okay, Perhalis for 4 games. Morris did her job, Chris. Now, Penny, do your job, please. Sign Megan Simmons. I'm tired of seeing her take selfies on Instagram and go out and have fun with her friends, Chris. Sign her to a contract for the rest of the year, Chris. Give this draftee, who was drafted in this year's draft by New York, Chris, give her a shot at least, man. I mean, that's all you can do is at least bring her in for July and add her onto the postseason roster if and when you get there right now, because you're barely holding on to the 4 seed. But, Chris, do something, okay? Because, Chris, okay, maybe not sign Simmons, Chris, because we do have someone else we're going to talk about, Chris, that could be back July 8th, Chris, but, okay. Morris did her job, Chris. Any sort of future transaction moves, Chris, perhaps by Penny Toller, Chris, either cutting Morris. But what do you think, though, man, now knowing that Tolliver is back in here to stay for the rest of the season?
I think maybe, I'm saying maybe, but Penny Toller will cut Morris and hope, sign, and bring in Megan Simmons to help out and bring the Sparks to playoffs and hold on to the 4th seed, or maybe climb up to the 3rd or something like that. And yeah.
And I'm glad you did not say the number 1 seed, Chris, because that is nowhere in LA sights right now. But, Chris, okay, Morris gets cut, Chris. You signed Simmons, but, Chris, wait a second. There was a viral video today from one particular San Diego native who is looking healthy, folks. Candace Wiggins, her first practice back today. A little one-on-one session, Chris, at LA Southwest College, Chris. Again, suffering her injured meniscus earlier in the year in the first game of the year, Chris. She has not played since May 16th, Chris. But the video was posted today, Chris, and she looks like she is moving with a great deal of fluidity, Chris. Like I told her, man, she favored it on Twitter. Someone looks healthy. She's been saying, Chris, July 8th will be her first game back, Chris, and above all, it'd be her first game back. Chris against Chris, the team that drafted her in 2008, and the team that she won a title with in 2011, Chris. That would be her Minnesota Lynx, Chris, and your mind, man, at this point in time. Okay, man, now that Tolliver's back, now, Chris, July 8th could be the first time we see Candace Wiggins back, Chris. How do you think she'll do her first game back? And above all, Chris, at the Target Center where she called that building home until 2012, man. What do you think?
I think Candace Wiggins will be back healthy and get the Sparks, be pumped up and get the Sparks on a roll.
We'll see what happens, folks. But, folks, we are out of time tonight here for Sparks 365, folks. We've hit our 11 o'clock curfew for that gentleman in the hangout who's got to go to sleep now, folks, so we'll cut it short here. But, folks, we thank you guys very much for joining us here on the LA Sparks 365 Network, folks. In the recap of the game last night, the Sparks beat the Tulsa Shock in overtime after squandering a 50-point lead last night, 92-89 the final score in overtime at the BOK Center in Tulsa, Oklahoma. So, folks, until probably tomorrow, maybe Tuesday following the Sparks game against Chicago, please have a safe night. Drive home, stay everything we're coming, and good night. Now, this has been the LA Sparks 365 Network. We are Sparks, we are LA, we are the WNBA. See folks either tomorrow or Tuesday. See you folks then. Bye-bye.